Matthew chapter 20. I'm going to begin in verse 1. This is a teaching of Jesus, one of his parables. And he said, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out, and he saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, 'You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. He went out again about noon, and about 3 in the afternoon, and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, 'Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?' 'Because no one has hired us,' they answered. He said to them, 'You also go and work in my vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, 'Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first.' The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came, and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. 'These who were hired last worked only 1 hour,' they said, 'and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day.' But he answered one of them, 'I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last.'" Friday night at Vacation Bible School, the first night we were here, I was the Bible station leader. And the topic was about how Jesus calls each one of us. And I used this parable as an example. And because it was kind of fun, and because everyone said you have to do it on Sunday morning, I made this little song that's a recap of this parable. So if you didn't get it the first time I read it, you'll get it now. Here you go. There once was a man who owned a vineyard. He needed some men to work very hard. He hired some men early in the day, told them a denarius would be their pay. Every few hours he hired a few more men, telling them the same again and again. "I'll pay you a denarius." In the evening, he paid them their wage. The ones who came early expressed outrage.
"You work harder than anyone here. Aren't you being just a bit unfair?"
"Yo, I'm not being unfair to you. A denarius is what you agreed to." A denarius. "Now take your pay and go, even though you think it's low. It's not about what you earn. There's something you need to learn. For I'll be gracious to whom I want. I'll be generous even though you're not. With my denarius." There are Christians who live a long, long time, laboring all day under the vine. But some get saved when they are old, only then entering the fold. But nonetheless, on Judgment Day, all will receive the very same pay. For the point is not doing his biz, it's rather revealing how gracious he is. Yo, denarius, 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 denarius. I'm surprised you don't know the words yet. Denarius, denarius. Check this out. Denarius. Denarius. I guess it was fun the second time too. All right, we'll get a little more serious here. Hope you still have a Bible in front of you. A few things I want to point out. I think this is a remarkable teaching of Jesus. One of the things I want you to see is that this teaching, this parable, is bracketed by the same statement. So if you look at the last verse in chapter 19, it's verse 30, Jesus says this. He says, "But many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first." And then at the end of the parable, you saw Jesus said basically exactly the same thing. Verse 16, "So the last will be first, and the first will be last." Actually, this is one of the core teachings of Jesus, that the last will be first, the first will be last. He tells this story of a landowner. Of course, you don't get too far into this parable before you realize this is about the kingdom of God. And so the landowner is a metaphor for God. He goes out early in the morning. In fact, at 6 a.m., he hires workers. Those workers work all day long as there's daylight, between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. And just so you know this, it's a metaphor for life. So there are some who get hired right away early in the morning. There are some later, he goes out and they're hired midday. There are some who are hired in the afternoon. There are some who are hired even late in the evening. And at the end, he comes to give their pay. And of course, that's a metaphor for not only life, but then Judgment Day itself. I want to make just 3 points as we go along. The first thing I want to make, it's really a simple point, but profound. The point I want to make is this, that it's the Lord who goes out. When it comes to salvation, when it comes to entering the kingdom of God, actually God's on a mission and he's going out. So if you look, verse 1 starts this way. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner," and then it says, "who went out." And then if you look at verse 3, you find those same words. "About 9 in the morning, he went out." Then if you look in the middle of verse 5, you see it again. "He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon." And then look at verse 6 again. "About 5 in the afternoon, he went out." I'm not going to belabor the point. It's just this, that there is a God who is going out. He's not sitting back and waiting. When it comes to salvation, it's not like we need to go on a quest to find him. He is the one who is going out and initiating. He's calling us. And I think the idea in this parable is that he's doing that throughout our life. So some hear that call and respond very early. But if they don't respond early, it's not like you just have one chance. God keeps going out. So somewhere later in your life, there it is again. Somewhere later in your life, there it is again. And I would just simply say this. Probably everyone here knows that. If you think about your life, you just look back, there are times where you know it. God was dealing with you in a very direct way, inviting you, calling you. I actually was reading a sermon that St. Augustine, who was one of the 4th century church fathers, wrote about this parable. And there was a great quote because in the sermon he says, well, I know when I say this, there's going to be some people who say, wait a second, I didn't hear him call me. And then this was the line in Augustine's sermon. He said, but you may say perhaps that the householder hath not gone out to call thee. If he hath not gone out, then what mean our addresses to you? So what he's saying is like, look, I mean, even right now while you're listening to me preach, Augustine said, God is calling you. Now, maybe you're choosing not to listen. Maybe you're doing everything you can to suppress it and wall it off. But I think if everyone will stop and slow down, you'll realize when it comes to knowing God, it's not that you have to go on some big quest to find him. He's going out, and he's calling you, and he's giving you opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to respond. Point one. Point number two. This is an important point. The Lord wants workers in his harvest field. So that's the basic idea of this parable. He keeps on going out to find workers who will be at work in his harvest field. And, At the bottom of the slide, I said the Lord wants workers in the harvest field, and I have just there in brackets, because I think this is true, perhaps more than about anything else. Here, in Matthew chapter 9, Jesus, he saw that the crowds were like a sheep without a shepherd. He turned to his disciples. This is what he said. He said, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." This was a metaphor, an image that Jesus used again and again. The harvest field is people. He looked around. He saw that people were beaten down. They were in misery. They were abused. They were in sin. They were alone. God said, wow, the harvest is ripe. So what should we do if we notice that? Pray that God will send workers out into the harvest field. Those who will be about the business of the kingdom, inviting others to a relationship with Jesus, discipling them, and helping them to grow in their walk with Christ. And here, as I emphasize this point, I'll just say the metaphor Jesus did not use is something like this, that, the landowner went out and he picked fruit and put it in a basket. It's not, when it comes to salvation, it's not just that Jesus picks us up off the tree and puts us into a basket and we just sit there. Rather, he goes out and he hires workers. All the time here at Sunlight, if you come for any period of time, and if you're new here, great, welcome. I explain the main message of the Bible, the gospel, with just 3 words: sin, salvation, service. And when I talk about the first 2 words, sin and salvation, I really do my very best to speak about how it's all by grace. We don't have to earn God's favor. It's nothing that we have to do. It's not our work that saves us, but rather it's grace. It's what God has done for us in the person of Jesus Christ. Grace, grace, grace. I'll sound that note at the end of this sermon again, because that ultimately is the note of this parable. But it's sin, salvation, service. Are you saved from your sin? If so, it's not for nothing to just sit in a basket, so to speak. It's to be about his work. And I'll just say this, here in Port St. Lucie, it's become my conviction that this is one of the greatest mission fields of all North America. If you're a Christian, it's no accident that you've been placed here. God has work for us to do. Man, this Vacation Bible School, I've been so pleased by how many people worked and volunteered, had a heart for service and the kingdom. I think that's so important, but if you've been saved and you haven't started to work to serve, I just want to urge you and encourage you. In fact, let me try it this way. Matthew chapter 4, verse 19. In fact, this was the theme of the very first night. Jesus approached people who would be his disciples. They were fishermen. And they were out by the lake, and they were casting their nets, and they were pulling in fish. That was their work. And Jesus said, "Here, come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Boy, I love that. There's something about this life that I guess it's mundane. We carry out our daily tasks. We build widgets. We buy thingamabobs. We work to maintain and protect them. But, in a way, just doing our daily routines can be very meaningless. Let me try it this way. In the spirit of our camp theme, Nestor, where are you? I worked this out ahead with him. Here you go. If this works out right, we will not hurt you, Glenroy. But if it doesn't work out, you'll have to duck. All right. Are you safe over there? All right. I have this piece of paper that I made, and maybe some of you in the front can see it. Those of you who can't, I took a picture earlier. I just wrote on that piece of paper, "My life." So it's like a timeline. You can see it starts over here. You're born, then you're 5 years old, then at some point you're 20 years old, and then 35, and then 50, and then 75, and then some of us, 90. I didn't keep going after that because there's not too many who can add another 15 years. Anyway, here's the thing. If you're a Christian, then you know this, that this life as a timeline is very short compared to the eternity that follows. And, if I really wanted to illustrate this right, we just send Nestor clear out the door there, and it would keep on going, right? That's why we say when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining of the sun, we'll have no less days to sing his praise than when we first begun. I mean, what is 90 years compared to 10,000? So here's the thing. In this life, we're like fishers. We catch fish, we build widgets, we buy thingamabobs, we have our stuff we do every single day. Let me share the words of Jesus with you. He said, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures here on earth, where moth and rust destroy, thieves break in and steal." He said instead, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. And it's a really simple point that I want to make. Jesus, I think, does something, it's very profound. He gives meaning to our life. If we catch fish, if we make widgets, if we buy thingamabobs, it's really for this short time frame. But if Jesus enters in, he can give us work to do that won't just end here, but will last there. Jesus is saying this: why waste your time trying to make things really nice here? Instead, spend all your time concerned about the rest of it. It makes no sense to spend all your effort here. And when sin, salvation, service, you become a worker in his harvest field. When your care and concern is to bring others in, to bring in the harvest, what you do lasts, it matters, it will carry over the whole rest of the timeline. Don't just concern yourself here, that's the point. Be a worker in his harvest field. All right, let's pull this in. We're going to save you guys. We got you. Thank you. Here, I'll just give the rest to you. Thanks, Nestor. All right, that's point number 2. Point number 3. I'm going to come back around to it. Grace. And there's at least 2 different ways that we can see it here in this passage, just boldly, that God comes not based on who we are or how great we are, on what we've earned or accomplished or done, but rather by his initiative. We'll try it way number 1, back to stick figures. So here's the deal. Of course, you've picked this up, but maybe you didn't think about it. First time I read this, I didn't think about it. He goes out in 6 in the morning. Of course, at that time, it's harvest time, so everybody's field is ripe. And he goes into the marketplace where people who are looking for work are there presenting themselves, and they're hoping to get a job. And it's like, when you were in school and they wanted to pick teams. If you're out there hiring somebody, who are you going to hire? Well, you're going to hire the intelligent. So, okay, we've got him there. He got picked. You're going to hire the fast. You're going to hire the capable. You're going to hire the strong. And, those were pretty pathetic stick drawings up there, right? So, who doesn't get hired? Well, it's the weak. It's the incapable. It's those who naturally get passed over. But this landowner, he's not just concerned about who can do what. And in fact, that's not his concern at all. Because at 9 in the morning, he goes back. And who's the pool he's hiring from then? He goes back again at noon. who's the pool he's hiring from then. He goes again back at 3 in the afternoon. He goes again at 5 in the afternoon. Now, normally, like I said, we're out there thinking he's going to choose the wise, the intelligent, the young, the fast, the strong, the capable. But this landowner, he is not choosing the wise, the fast, the strong, the young, the capable. He's calling to everyone. He's calling to every single person. Come, I've got a place for you. Come work in my harvest field. That's the first place we see it. The second place we see it, and I think this is profound, you see it at the very end. He treats the last as if they had worked the whole day. So the very first group at 6 in the morning, he says, look, if you come work for me, I'll pay you a denarius. By the way, I should just tell you this, a denarius was considered a full day's wage. For those of you who are interested, I have in my office, I just keep this hanging up, denarius from the time of Jesus. And I'll just leave this on the stage. If anyone wants to, after the service, come and look at it. This is a neat little, I guess, archaeological relic. And if you want to know what a, denarius looks like, you can come up after the service. But here's the neat thing. He agreed to pay them a denarius, which is a day's wage. They said, great. And they went to work. Every time he went out again and again, he said, I'll pay you what's right. But at the end of the day, those who had worked only 1 hour, he treated them as though they had worked the whole day. This is so profound. I want to highlight this phrase on the screen right now, as if. He treats the last as if they worked the whole day. There's an ancient catechism which taught people about the Christian faith called the Heidelberg Catechism. In its 60th question and answer, it asks something profound, like, how are you saved? And it's phrased this way, how are you righteous before God? How will you have a standing in his presence? That's the question. And the answer is a bit long, but I want to get to the whole thing. It says this, only by true faith in Jesus Christ. That's the only way to be righteous. Even though my conscience accuses me of having grievously sinned against all God's commandments, and of never having kept any of them, and of still being inclined toward all evil. So even though that's the case, and that's certainly true for me, I mean, there's no way I could possibly pretend to stand here before you and tell you that that's not true. That, look, I've broken every last commandment. I've not kept them at all. And I'm still, in my heart, even now, though I'm a Christian, I still feel my heart leaping toward evil. Even though that's all true, this is what the answer says. Nevertheless, without any merit of my own, out of sheer grace, there's the word, sheer grace. Here's how the answer continues. God grants and credits to me the perfect satisfaction, righteousness, and holiness of Christ. Here are these two words. As if I had never sinned, nor been a sinner. And as if I had been as perfectly obedient as Christ was obedient for me. All I need to do is accept this gift with a believing heart. Sin, salvation, service. Look, we all have to admit we're sinners. We have not kept God's commandments. Our hearts are still inclined toward and leap at evil. The only way to be right is this. God sent his son, Jesus Christ, into the world. He came and lived the life we were supposed to live. The way he lived. The manner of his living. The record of his righteousness. He lived the life we were supposed to live. And then he died the death we were supposed to die. And here's why. In his death, God took all our sin and put it on Jesus so that he could take all his righteousness and just give it to us. You see, it's grace. It's not something we earn. It's something that's given to us if, and this is what it says at the end, all I need to do is accept this gift with a believing heart. And when I say that it's the Lord going out and he's calling people to faith. Believe in Jesus Christ today. That's what he's calling you to. So he treats the last as if they had worked the whole day. Grace. Maybe this will help because I want to drive toward this final statement that brackets both the beginning and the end. Just some simple definitions. Justice. When justice is carried out, we get what we deserve. So here, at the end of the day, those who had worked early in the morning, they said, wait, that's not fair. They're appealing to justice. They're saying that's not just, that's not fair. When things are just and fair, we get what we deserve. Mercy. Mercy is this: we don't get what we deserve. So, if you commit a crime, but you're not punished for that crime, then someone's had mercy on you. Grace is so much more robust than that. Because in grace, we get what we don't deserve. So, you can think about it this way. If you think about your own life and your relationship to God and how you fit into this parable, is there anyone here who could say, I've worked in God's vineyard from the beginning, and I've worked exactly the way He wanted the whole time so that I deserve what God can give at the end? I don't think there's a single one of us that can say that. But if by faith in Jesus Christ we turn to Him, and this is the point of the parable, even if we weren't there from the beginning, even if we didn't work as hard as we should have, here it is, we get what we don't deserve. Because Jesus lived the life we were supposed to live. He died the death we were supposed to die. And God treats us as if we lived His life and died His death. Which, now that we've gotten that far, justice, we get what we deserve. Mercy, we don't get what we deserve. Grace, we get what we don't deserve. Now we can make sense of this last verse. Verse 16, so the last will be first, and the first will be last. Let's start with the last half. The first will be last. If in your heart you say, I'm strong and I'm able and I'm working for God and I'm doing it, I want to be treated according to what I deserve. If you're first like that, then it turns out you're going to be mistaken because you'll actually wind up last. If God treats us what we deserve, there's nothing that we can earn from Him. But now the last will be first. This is the idea of grace. If we humbly receive our reward from Christ, we just come to Him humbly, He treats us as if we had lived and worked the way Jesus did. It's by grace. It's by grace. If we don't put I'm able, I'm capable, if instead we come humble, we say, boy, I'm a 5 o'clock person. I haven't worked the whole day. I'll just take what you give. We'll be surprised by grace. He gives us what we don't deserve. The whole kingdom is like that. It's the Lord who goes out. He goes out. He goes out. He's going out right now. He's calling you. He's calling you. He's calling you. Believe in Jesus. He's calling you. Believe in Jesus. Is there any reason? Well, after listening to all this, after hearing His voice again and again throughout your life, not today, you won't turn and believe. Is there any reason to not believe today? He goes out. It's by grace He transforms our life. Instead of just having this short little bracketed time of maybe 90 years, if you're one of just a very few, making widgets, buying whatchamacallits, living for the moment, by grace, He'll give your life meaning so that the things you do right now will last forever. That's by grace. And if you'll come to Him by grace, He'll treat you as if you were Jesus Himself, as if you had worked the whole day and done everything the way you should have, by grace.